Hey guys, how are you doing? I mean, like this is the last talk of the conference. I'm very tired. You probably too. But I had an awesome conference. So let's get started. So we are all in Amsterdam because of the Blender conference, of course. But most people, when they go to Amsterdam, the reason for that is that, so they say, it's the best place to buy weed. And yeah, I'm very sorry to disappoint them, but most of the time they're wrong. Because Amsterdam isn't the best place to buy weed, but the internet is. Because, like, you can't only buy one weed there, you can buy multiple weeds. And that's actually what I'm going to talk about today. So, how to sell weeds, which is the story of Graswald. I'll come to that in a second. But first, just a few words about myself. My name is Julius Harling. I'm 17 years old. I'm from Hanover, that's in Germany. And I still go to school. That sucks. Yeah. But besides school, what I like to do is I play handball. I sing a lot. I sing in a boys' choir in Hanover. I play the piano. I try to go to the gym. That's not really accurate how it is there. That's how I wished it would be. I have a wonderful girlfriend, which I love to cook for. And I do Blender. That's why I'm here, right? And I do a lot of stupid stuff. I don't know what that is. And I'm the founder of Graswald. So just by show of hands, who has heard about Graswald or has seen this render or this one? Oh, wow, quite a few. That's cool. So for everyone who doesn't know what Graswald is, I have prepared a little video. Enjoy. Thank you very much. Now, whenever you do such a huge project, you have to do a lot of this planning. Of course, makes sense. Now, there's one issue though with planning, because what planning means is that you know what you're going to do before you actually do it. And that's a problem because, of course, you all know it. Whenever you start working on something, these problems somehow pop up. You don't know where they come from, and even in areas that you didn't even know existed before. So one quick example of that is grass. I think you all know how grass looks, right? So if I ask you to draw some grass, you'll probably all draw something like this. Yeah, simply grass, right? But if you ask Google, show me pictures of grass, you get something like this. And you can see like every single picture looks completely different than another one. And it just, I mean, it blew me away. I was like, wait, is this all grass? It's like so different. And if we narrow it down, we could get something like this maybe. So there are kind of three different kinds of grass. We have species that have like this big tussock grass. We have smaller tufts, and we have the cut grass that will probably grow in your lawn. Now the problem is that these 3 species aren't even 3 species, because they're all one and the same species, perennial ryegrass. Now, there are different approaches to how to solve this problem, because when I first started, I was like, okay, so what of these 3 grass variants should I model now? Because there's so many different, and I didn't want to only model one of them, because that would be like very sad. The other ones are so beautiful as well. And another approach, for example, would be to just combine them together in one model and model that one, but that would be far from being accurate. So what I decided to do then was I just created variants for each kind of variant for each species. So for the perennial ryegrass, for example, you can see like 3 different variants, like 3 different particle systems. But my models didn't always look like that. In the beginning, they looked like crap, basically. They looked flat, they looked like plastic, or like paper, and the only thing that resembled a plant somehow was that they were green. And it kind of sucked, and it really struck me when I was seeing this beautiful render by Dan Woji. I mean, just look at it for 1 second. It's just really beautiful. And I was wondering, how did this guy achieve such a beautiful render? And luckily, he posted a wireframe render of this work. And if you look at it, it's just very, very detailed. I mean, if you look at one of the grass blades that aren't even in focus in the real render, like one of these had more polygons than my entire scenes. So, and I tested it, and you can see like on the one side there's very low vertices, and you can kind of see some shading errors that are, of course, not present when you add more geometry. I mean, I'm talking about these ones. And which makes sense, because if you look at the attributes of a plant material, you have reflections, so they need a lot of geometry to be smooth and nice. You also have diffuse elements. They don't need that much details, but they also have translucency, and they have a lot of translucency. And translucency really needs a lot of geometry, so it gets displayed well. Otherwise, you get some of these weird shading errors that I showed on the other slide. So of course, makes sense. We need lots of polygons. And then I wanted to create a huge meadow with a lot of grass, and got something like this. It's like, yay, only 2,782 hours left until the render is complete. And then you start sitting there and waiting, oh, any second now. So no, let's not do that. We don't want lots of polygons. So there has to be another way to get good shading with relatively few detail. And so I was wondering, is there another way? And there is. And it allowed me that if you can just, you look at those, one is the old one, this one is the old one, and that's the new one. And you can clearly see the shading error, right, on the old one. It's just ugly, and look, you can see the triangles even of the mesh. And the new method I used allowed me to have only 54 vertices on the new model, although there were 75 on the old one. So one reason for that might be, okay, the old model didn't have transparency. I added transparency later on because I think it's important, especially for close-up, to being able to deliver that kind of detail, especially on the left side of the new leaf. You can see this kind of semi-transparent areas that you can't do that with just polygon modeling. But that's not the real reason why I have a better shading on the new version. The reason is something that probably, if you're a creature or a character artist, you probably know that, and most of you probably do. It's this, topology. If you look at the old version, it has actually a pretty shitty topology. I mean, look, it's just lots of triangles, and the angles are very bad. And the new one has quite a nice, I mean, it's far from being perfect, but it does its job. I mean, the shading is nice. And that's something that most people don't look into when they create plants, because it takes more time. But I think in the end, it really pays off. So after solving these two and like 1,000 more other problems, I could finally start creating. So I I created a lot of plans. I turned into some kind of a full-time plan creating machine. And I've been asked to talk about my workflow a lot of times, so I'll just very shortly talk about it right now. Now, of course, the first thing you do is you need textures. So you shoot the textures, and I do that with actually this phone here. It's very easy. It gives great results. You don't need like a very sophisticated camera setup. I go to overcast lighting, so the sun shouldn't be directly giving you sharp reflections and shadows. So this is kind of okay-ish. And also what's very important, people tend to only like photograph very clean, very nice leaves, but that's not how nature is, of course. So I try to have dead leaves in there, like flowers, every part of the plant, stems, old leaves, older leaves, and also the young ones, so you can then arrange them and have much more realism in your models. Then also I have to collect the reference, right? I use my own photography for that when I'm also shooting the textures, but I also use scientific photography that I can find on the internet, as well as scientific drawings, because I like how other artists already interpreted that species. That's also why I also look at 3D models of other people and look how they might kind of created the model, what workflow they might have used. And when I've done that, I cut everything out in Photoshop and arrange it as a new layout, as a texture layout. After that, I do some adjustments. As you can see here, the old texture has a lot of highlights there and some shadows. So I use the shadows and highlights adjustment in Photoshop to kind of get rid of that. And it does a fairly nice job. After that, it always depends on the texture. So in this case, it was very bright, so I made it darker. I, again, put a shadows and highlights pass on that because you could still see some reflections, but now it looks super ugly. It's like very saturated. So I desaturated it and made it a bit darker. And then I did a final color correction. So because I have multiple assets, right? Not only the nettle, so I kind of compare them. So in total, they look great in a scene. So, and when you've done that, you can sign it. So everyone knows it's yours. Now, after that, I start modeling. I start, first of all, creating the smallest elements of the plant, the leaves and the stems. And after that, I kind of put them together to create bigger components. This way, I don't have to repeat my steps over and over again, but I can easily kind of create models with different variations, just kind of building them together. For example, you can see here the flowers are created that way, and the actual models as well. And while I create the models, I also try to create the particle systems in the same way, because some models are very basic, and you don't need a lot of variety, a lot of different models for the particle system so it looks good and not repetitive. But for example, the stinging nettle is a very detailed plant, so we needed a lot of different model variation, so it didn't look repetitive on the particle system when you put a lot of the plants together. So after you've done that, you can start selling. But how to actually sell weeds or grass effectively? I've asked myself that question as well. And so I looked at the most successful products on the Blender market. And what I noticed, you probably all know these products. And what I noticed was that all of these 6 products belong to 3 or 4 creators. Andrew Price from the Blender Guru, 80 Burrows from CG Masters, and Glab Alexandra from CreativeShrimp.com, and this guy here from CG Cookie. And so I was wondering, what do all these guys have in common? Like, how are they all so successful? And the answer is pretty easy, because they all have a huge media attention. They all have their YouTube channels. They have a lot of people watching their tutorials, watching their stuff. So a lot of people know them, and a lot of people buy their products. So of course, I still go to school. I don't have that much time to create like a huge YouTube channel or something else. But I tried it anyway. So I created my own Twitter account, my own ArtStation account, Facebook, YouTube, and Blender Artist Thread. These are, I think, the most important social medias for 3D artists, at least a Blender artist. And I also try to do a lot of things there. I try to do Twitter, to tweet something every 2 to 3 days. That was kind of my main full-time spam social media. I also try to publish a new artwork showing my models in an actual scene once a month, at least in my very productive moments. I also wanted to use Facebook as much as I use Twitter, but I just don't like Facebook. So it was like 4 to 5, every 4 to 5 days. YouTube, I tried to do that once a month, but only for 2 months. So there are only 2 videos from me on my channel, because it's just very, very time consuming to create those videos. And Blender Artist, also every time I had something new, even if it was just a technical aspect or just I created another leaf, I had something to show, I showed it. And that's very great. Because what you basically want to achieve with all of these is get attention, right? But you don't only, of course, you want to get attention to persuade your potential customers, like, buy it, please, it's so cool. But that's not the only thing. I think what's even more important, or at least as important as these persuasion, is to get feedback. What do you think? Ask the people. Because these people that you're showing your work to are your potential customers. So you want to know what they think, because they should buy it in the end, so they can also suggest how they think your product looks, right? Kind of makes sense, I think. And that's also why I think Blender Artist is such a great place to be, because there are a lot of people there that can give you a lot of feedback, and I used it extensively here. So if we sum it up, the first thing you do is kind of do some planning, right? Then comes the creation process, and then some form of publicizing it. It doesn't even be the final release, but it is like showing your work to the community. Now, what makes sense, of course, is first plan, then create, then publicize, which is why I exactly did the same thing. Of course not. It is just not possible. I tried it very hard, but it just doesn't work, because whenever you create something and then something doesn't work, you have to go back and forth, and it just creates a whole mess, as you can see there. And that's okay. I mean, we're just humans, everyone, and it's okay to have such a mess. But if we narrow that down, I think we can actually get to something quite nice here, which is this thing here. So you plan something, then you create it, and maybe while you're creating it, you already notice, oh, something's kind of wrong, I'm gonna go back to the planning phase. Or you can also then publicize your plan to the community and get feedback. You can go back and replan it, or go back and create something, show it to the community again. And let's call this something fancy. Let's call this the cycle of add-on creation. That sounds cool. But basically, if you think about it, it's the cycle of add-on creation and pretty much everything. Because regardless if you're an add-on creator or a 3D artist or a comic book author or a businessman, that cycle, you always have to get through this, especially if you want to get better. If you want to improve on the things you do, you have to go through this a lot of times and again and again. And when you think you're finished, go back and do it again, because every time you'll improve yourself somehow. But how to keep going? So how to not stop, because it's a very exhausting process, always going back and forth. And I think there are two things that helped me the most in this process. The first one is that there are 2 types of tasks, actually. The first one is of course, the planning. It's like the thinking periods where you have to create something new, you have to develop, invent something. And these are the ones that are really time-consuming and memory-consuming, because you have to actually sit down and create something from scratch and think a lot. And personally, I need at least to know that I have like a minimum of 2 hours to start working on that, because you have to like think inside of that and you have to be in there. And the good thing though is that's not the only thing, the only kind of task you have to do. There's also the creation process, or the creating thing, and that really isn't much. These are the crafting periods, and the only thing you have to do is repeat your workflow. The ones probably, for example, the one that I already showed. You have to repeat what's already known. And the good thing is that you don't need much time for that. I say a minimum of 5 minutes is okay. I mean, I go to the computer, turn it on, 2 minutes maybe, if you have a bad computer. Then you even still got 3 minutes left. Open Blender and kind of create an outline of one leaf, model one leaf. You've already got another leaf done. And you can stop it, then do something else, come back later, and create another leaf. another leaf done. So really the good thing is you don't need much time to get things done. And I think that's very motivational, because I used to always wait longer and longer. And it's like, yeah, oh, I don't have time enough. I need like 5 hours or 6 hours to start working, and you don't need that, really. Or at least I didn't need it. It's just something in your head. You have to know 5 minutes are enough to get things done. And the second thing is kind of the relation of fun and work, which is especially very important if you're doing such a huge project, and also besides doing something else, like in my case, school. And I think what's important for that is kind of your mindset, because you have times where you think, oh, it requires so much discipline, and then it requires so much time, and I don't have the time, and I have to do tasks that I do not like. For example, I don't know, creating some textures that you have to recover, anything that's just tedious, and it's something that you don't really like. But what you have to keep in mind always is that, or I try to keep in mind personally, I actually like doing this. This is what I do as a free time, and I enjoy doing most of the parts, and I like it. It's my free time, exactly. And in the end, I can be proud of myself because I achieved something. I can be standing right here talking to you guys, which is awesome. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind whenever you have a personal project that you're working on. The hard things are just keep it going. And these are the things that help me the most. Thank you very much.